So we got some big news on the legal front. I know this is where you come to get all your legal news, you know, the two law scholars that we are. But there was we had anticipated the ruling from the Supreme Court about HISA. The Supreme Court obviously disappears for months and months and months and then issues a ton of rulings in June, and then everybody has to adjust. And there were some big ones, some major ones that'll have some major implications on American society. But we'll move on and talk about the one that's specific to racing. HISA is still constitutional, still the law of the land. It was the Supreme Court remanded the cases back to the lower courts to reconsider. So they basically punted on deciding any of them. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals was the one that said the enforcement mechanism of HISA was, I don't know, it was unconstitutional, but it was unconstitutional because it couldn't delegate the powers of the government to a private corporation. All that. This is my layman's reading of it, but all the rulings from the Fifth, Sixth, and Eighth Court of Appeals circuits were sent back down to those courts to reconsider, and that at least I think kicks the can down the road a good amount at the very least. It sounds like the HBPA and the litigants, the plaintiffs in these cases, are going to continue and press on with their legal arguments. I don't know how many times the girl has to tell you no before you stop asking her out, because this has been a lot. This has been a lot of wasted energy, I think, and wasted money to try to strike down a program that is now fully in place and is having the desired effect, at least in terms of the medication control and the safety of the horses. Whether or not you have this small disagreement on the constitutionality of a certain part of it, I think it would behoove everybody in the industry to withdraw the lawsuits, get back together, and have a unified system across all 50 states. Obviously, certain people don't feel that way. Jon, you're on the HISA board. You might have some insight on this. What's your reaction?
Well, Joe, you nailed it perfectly. Basically, HISA's not going away anytime in the near future. The fact that this has been kicked back down below the district courts means that it's going to be another possibly couple of years before it'll even be back up in oral arguments, if it goes to that point. I mean, right now, all parties are looking to the courts now to basically say, what do we need to do? Are we starting from scratch? Are we just going to wait and hear what this FCC case, how it plays out? Because that's kind of how this all got started not started in the first place, how it all ended up the way it is right now is that there was a related case, an FCC case that the U.S. Supreme Court heard first, because that was their preference. And they basically said in that case exactly what you said, which is, that we're not going to hear this, and that we're going to vacate all of these previous rulings and have you start from scratch. So now it's just a matter of, do you want to continue to pour resources into this fight, or do you want to finally say HISA isn't perfect? And nobody said that any system is perfect, but that it is the law of the land. It is the way that things are being done right now. And Joe, one of the things that I hear a lot about from a complaint standpoint about people who are anti-HISA, okay, and I'm going to throw out the constitutionality argument out altogether. That's not what people really are complaining about. What they're really complaining about is that it's an expense, and for these smaller racetracks, it's a big expense. And, for Monmouth Park, for example, when you run a horse there, it's a couple $100 to, that you pay in a fee for testing and for HISA. But, when you look at the budget of HISA, and again, I don't have clearance to talk about it in great detail, but basically say it's a $70,000 or $80,000 budget that HISA runs, and $7 million of it is for legal fees. Okay, primarily, mostly of it being, utilized for these fights with the other opposing parties. So that's roughly 7 to 10% of your operating budget is for legal fees. Well, you know what? That would have a major impact on the per start fee or on the fees that people are paying into HISA when they're racing. And again, what you have to understand is that's not the only line item that's in there, and I'm not going to get into the accounting of it or anything like that. But for the love of God, man, if you're against it because you're against it simply because you want the old rules in place. Well, that didn't work very well. And I know a lot of owners and a lot of trainers that would be out of the business if that was the case. At least this gives everyone a fighting chance of having an even playing field. But stop complaining about your per start fees when you're insisting on having, all of these legal, what I would say would be needless legal fights in order to try to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court all over again. You can take from it and say, hey, we won the Fifth Circuit and therefore, we have a victory. And that's all well and good. There's two other circuits, 6th and 8th, that said the opposite. And now we're starting this game all over again. So if we want to continue to pour resources into it, have at it, because I think HISA is going to have deeper pockets. But it goes back to what you were saying in the very beginning, which is, can't we all just get along? Can't we all just sit down at this point and say, you know what, the court system, we've played it out through one round of the court system. And they basically came back and said, almost very similar to what the Florida State Assembly said to us with decoupling. We don't want to fight this fight for you. You guys need to figure this shit out. So everyone sit down in a room together and let's get this, worked out to the best of everyone's ability. And that's what I think. And again, I'm not speaking for HISA here. I'm just speaking as Jon Green. That wouldn't it be great if we got together, if HISA got together with Eric Hamelback and his group, who I understand represents a big group of people, and just sit down and figure out how we can work this out, where instead of fighting and throwing wasted assets and money and time into this, to come up with some kind of an understanding where everyone is happy. Because right now there's more racetracks that are going to be falling by the wayside for both reasons, because it's costing a lot of money to, for testing and to keep HISA going. And also because there's other states that don't want to abide by it, and they're dying on the vine right now.
Yeah. I mean, this is like when Texas fell off the HISA map, and the consequence of that was that they couldn't export their signal. I was like, well, no way they put up with that. They'll come back to the table. That was fucking years ago now. Yeah. How much has Texas racing suffered as a result of this, honestly, petulance, I think, to not come to the table and not work with HISA. You nobody outside of your state can bet on your races, and that's an acceptable status quo for you now. That's you don't want to try to fix that and rectify that by coming to the table and trying to get back involved in this nationwide compact. I don't understand that. And, right. Like we were saying, I just think the resources and the energy of the horsemen are so much better directed in other places. For example, we talked about the raid at Delta Downs last week. I got to give credit to Eric Hamelback and the HBPA, who've issued a lot of guidance to trainers and to the racetracks on how to respond if ice comes, and, right. how to protect your employees and all that. That is an enormous service, and I think a great use of a horsemen's union and their resources. This is not, and it's become so apparent the more the courts rule against them and the more the cases get kicked back down, that this is just it's a fool's errand. I think it's throwing good money after bad, and there are just, as you mentioned, John, with the precariousness that a lot of racetracks are in right now, and a lot of employees, a lot of the backstretch employees are in right now. It seems like we should be redirecting our resources and our attention as an industry towards that, as opposed to continuing to have these internecine fights about the constitutionality of HISA. If it were blatantly unconstitutional, it would have been struck down by now. I'm sorry. I know I'm not a legal expert, but this has been going on long enough that if it's this nuanced, then there really isn't that big of a problem with it that's going to result in it being completely thrown out.
No, and Joe, look, we're not attorneys, and I know we say that a lot, and we have to for disclaimer purposes for a lot of reasons. And we shouldn't be giving out legal advice by any stretch of the imagination. But there is a reason why the Supreme Court picked the FCC case to acknowledge and to move to the front of the line and to basically, give their guidance on, and then say. And it also includes a lot of these other cases that should get tucked under this ruling. Now start over again and let's see if we can figure this shit out. That's why they picked it. So the fact that basically the highest court in our country said we're picking this case over the HISA case shows you, in my humble opinion, that this was kind of an overarching, decision, and that basically it was more important than the fight that we have with HISA. But I'm glad that you brought up the point about Eric Hamelbeck and the National Horsemen's Association and how in charge and in front of the situation they were with the Delta Downs raid, because really in an industry that's so splintered like we are, their leadership actually stepped up and said, here are the things you need to do. Here are the things. It basically gave a blueprint of exactly what you should and shouldn't do if ICE shows up on your doorstep. And that added great value, and I think a lot of security and comfort to the members. And that's, to me, what the national organization should be doing is, helping get out in front and helping their constituents have an understanding of what happens when immigration comes in, when legal issues come in, and things like that. But in my opinion, it should not be, hey, we need to fight these set of rules because we don't feel like that it's the right thing to do from a legal standpoint. Joe, the last thing I'll say about this is that, I read a bunch of articles on this from the TDN and the Blood Horse and the Pollock Report. And I have to say that the Pollock Report, Andrew Cohen did a phenomenal job of basically, dumbing it down so somebody like I could understand, what the hell was going on, but also really did a good job of explaining what this meant and what it meant to all sides that had a dog in this game. And to me, it spelled out exactly what the good and the bad was from this Supreme Court decision, and also what it means to us as an industry. And I would highly recommend that people read that before they start going off on sidebars and off their rocker about making arguments, legal arguments. I think Andy Cohen did a really good job of boiling it down and explaining exactly what is important and what it means to us as an industry.